Welcome to another episode of David Talks, everybody. I hope you all had a wonderful Halloween. Larry, did you have a nice Halloween? Any candy that you gave to the trick-or-treaters?
Well, I didn't have much. I only had one.
What did you give them?
I gave him something personal, a Kit Kat with a little card I had in my wallet, 'cause I ain't have paper. Something personal I wrote on it.
Oh, that's nice of you, man. I didn't know you had that big of a heart.
Yeah, funny thing enough, I've been looking for my Social Security card. And on top of that, something's been buying some stuff on my debit card without any explanation. Like as if a ghost's been using my card.
Larry, this Social Security card, when was the last time you saw it?
Probably Halloween when I was looking in my wallet.
Let's move on to today's topics. Shari Smith was a young 17-year-old high school student who attended Lexington High School in South Carolina, and she was getting ready to sing the national anthem. At 3:38 p.m. on May 31st, 1985, Shari had just gotten back from a pool party with her friends. Shari needed to check the mail in her mailbox, and her mailbox was 700 feet away from her front yard. Her father, Bob Smith, had realized that 10 minutes had gone by before his daughter returned. So he starts going into the house, starts yelling for her name, checks the garage, checks her bedroom, checks the living room. Nothing in sight. And that's when he knew that something was wrong. So Bob got into his car and drove to the mailbox to see if his daughter Shari was okay. When he got to the mailbox, he realized that Shari's car was at the mailbox with Shari not in sight. So he looks at the car, the driver's side door is open, he looks inside and only sees her bag in the passenger seat. As he investigates further, he notices that there's footprints that are leading up to the mailbox, but none coming back to the car. Panicking, Bob decided to drive back to the house to tell his wife, Hilda. As soon as he told his wife, Hilda immediately replied, "Oh no, not my Shari." Realizing this, that's when they called Lexington County Police. And when the police got there, they started investigating the whole entire scene. The car that was parked, that was open, with Shari's bag in the car, and the footprints that was leading into the mail. But they also noticed that there was mail that was dropped on the floor randomly. And that's when they knew, okay, this doesn't sound right. With the evidence that was there, that's when everybody knew that this was a kidnapped child. So the investigation started to happen. Jim Metz, one of Lexington County's police, started organizing one of the largest manhunts in history in South Carolina in search of this kidnapper. 2 days after this, the Smith family had received a call from a mysterious man in a distorted voice demanding to talk to Mrs. Smith. When Mrs. Smith got on the phone, she believed that this was a hoax. But the man on the phone proved that it wasn't a hoax by describing the clothes that Shari was wearing. The yellow and black bathing suit that she was wearing underneath her shirt and shorts on the day that she disappeared.
Now this man in a distorted voice, who is he?
I'm getting to that.
Just say it, boy.
Shut the hell up, Larry. So he continued to say that Shari was fine and that she was doing well for herself. They were both watching TV together and that she was eating and drinking lots of water. He also added that tomorrow morning the Smith family will be receiving a letter in the mail. With police surveillance, they believed that this was the only way they could track the kidnapper. So investigators the next morning went to the postmaster's office with gloves on to track the letter that was addressed to the Smiths. When they opened up the envelope, they realized that it was a handwritten letter that was 2 pages describing by Shari how much she loved her family before she was murdered. Bob had shown the letter to his wife, and it said, "Please don't let this ruin your lives. Just keep on living one day at a time for Jesus. Some good will come out of this. My thoughts will always be with and in you." And in parentheses, the word closed casket. After this, investigators took the letter to a crime lab that they knew of by a guy named Mickey Lawson, who was able to provide clues with the letter in general. But as the letter was being analyzed, the Smith family had gotten a call from this mysterious man again. The man had said, "Do you believe me now?" Hilda then replied, "No, I don't, because I need to know that Shari is well and I need to talk to her." The man said, "You will know in 2 to 3 days." Then a couple days later, the man said that Shari is alive and well, and that she is there physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and that their souls are one now. Investigators traced the call at a local drugstore in Lexington, but in 1985, tracing a phone call took at least 15 minutes, and this phone call was very brief. So by the time that investigators were able to track where it was, the kidnapper was already gone, going somewhere else. Then the suspect says, at 4:58 a.m., no, I'm sorry, 3:10 a.m., Saturday the 1st of June, she had wrote what you received. 4:58 a.m., Saturday the 1st of June, became one soul. Shari's mom, Hilda, said, "Do not kill my daughter, please." And the mysterious man said, "She loves you all, get good rest tonight, goodbye." And that was it. So this mysterious man the next day makes another phone call. This time he's talking about where Shari's body is. So he tells him that they have to take 378 West to Prosperity Road, Moose Lodge number 103, and that Shari's body is right there. And he says the exact words, "Where God chose us." After hearing that phone call, investigators immediately went to that location. Hilda wanted to go see her daughter's body, but the policeman refused her to go with him. When police got there, they found Shari's body in back of this backyard in this random house. On the body was the clothes that she was last seen in, and investigators were able to estimate that Shari had died at 4:58 a.m. June 1st because of the abductor correcting himself on the phone multiple times on when Shari wrote the letter. My personal opinion in this story is very chilling. It's just sad to hear a girl like this, that is so young and very beautiful, to actually write a letter to her parents one final time on how much she loves them, and for them to stay calm after she dies, and of course to keep her casket closed. That part is just very sad, because at this point in time, you actually know that this girl knew what was coming and knew what was going to happen after she passed on. So, very sad. Now, investigators did find that Shari's body was in fact in terrible condition, and they found duct tape residue on her face, with her hair shoulder, and this added more evidence that this suspect was actually possibly in his late 20s, early 30s, and had a history of sex crimes. Investigators also believe that this suspect also had a technical educational background, because during the moments that he was actually calling the Smith family, he would intentionally distort his voice and actually have a script that was right in front of him. A couple days later, another phone call was given by the same mysterious man on the night of Shari's funeral. The man had explained how he murdered Shari. Then a couple weeks later, the suspect calls the Smith family again. Only this time, they don't want to talk about the murder of Shari. He talks about another murder that he just committed recently. So he talks to the Smith family on the phone, and he says, "Have you ever heard of Deborah Helmick?" And the family said, "No." And once the name was spelt on the phone, he says, Helmick, Helmick. And it was then that investigators and the Smith family knew that this was Deborah May Helmick, another recent missing little girl that was on the news. Apparently she was abducted in front of her parents' trailer some 24 miles away from the Smith family. The father was 20 feet away from inside the trailer. The suspect had picked her up and drove her off from inside of his car. But Deborah and Shari had one thing in common. They both had blonde hair and blue eyes. And just like with Shari's case, the suspect called this family and talked about where Deborah was. He said to go down 2 Knots Road with a trespassing sign that has chains on it. Then he says go 50 yards to the left, then 10 yards, and that's where Deborah May is. At this point, investigators knew that they were dealing with a serial killer, so they took Shari's letter and forensic analysis to see if there was any clues on it. They just assumed that the letter of the paper that Shari wrote on might have trace marks of like maybe a previous notepad that could have been on the killer's desk. So they started analyzing it. They put a powder on it over a humidity box. It was brushed with a black substance on the paper to maybe find clues if there was any marks on the paper from a previous time that the killer might have written on a notepad. Now from the trace marks that was being taken on this paper, they realized that there was a list of groceries that was on this paper, along with phone numbers and names for emergency contacts. But out of all the information that was on this paper, they noticed this one particular number that was on the paper, and that was a 205 number. And this 205 number was actually a part of Alabama's area code. Then they found the next set of numbers that was next to this 205 number. It was an 837 number. After that, they figured out the rest of the numbers by plugging in all these different last couple numbers until they got a credible number. So when the numbers got more detailed, they ended up calling this individual who was in Huntsville, Alabama. And when they called this number, They heard that it was a young man answering the phone asking who they were. They told him who they were, that they were investigators investigating a case of a young girl by the name of Shari Smith, who was 17 years old. So of course the young man on the phone said that he lived with his mother and father. The father got on the phone and identified himself as 50-year-old Ellis Shepard, who lived just 15 miles away from where this phone call was taking place. Now, at the time of Shari's abduction, Ellis Shepard was on vacation with his wife, and that ended up proving factual. So investigators asked Ellis, hey, since we're doing an investigation on this young girl, we want to show you a phone call that we've been recording and trying to find, because we can't seem to find this guy, and we need your help to see if you can identify him. So they start playing the recording to Ellis on the phone, and that's when Ellis realized and knew that this was his son, Larry Gene Bell, that committed the murder. It also did prove that he did do electrical wiring and did have a technical educational background because he worked for his father, Ellis. After all of this investigation that had been going on, Larry Gene eventually was arrested a couple months later, and he was executed in 1996 at just 46 years old and became the last man to die in the electric chair in South Carolina. So what did you think of that, Larry?
Before I was rudely told to shut up, I thought the story was great.
Sorry, man, but you were trying to spoil the story real quick, and I didn't want to give any names out too early.
Well, you told me to shut the hell up, and that's not nice.
Yeah, but you were pushy, and I gave you a nice passive response before I'd gotten to that level.
I don't remember that now.
Well, maybe this story will help you remember. The Chicago Tylenol murders.
The Chicago what?
Now, back then, Tylenol was easily tampered with, as anybody could just open up the bottle and put some stuff in it. The Tylenol murders claimed the lives of 7 people living near or in Chicago, Illinois. The first known victim was Mary Kellerman, a 12-year-old girl who lived in Elk Grove Village. On the morning of September 29, 1982, after having a severe headache and sore throat, Mary decided to take 2 Tylenol pills, but little did she know that in those pills it was filled with a deadly concoction, and that was cyanide. After ingesting these pills, Mary was dead hours later. Later that day, Adam Jonas, a 27-year-old postal worker who worked in Arlington Heights, Illinois, also felt unwell that day. Family members gathered around his home after his death, but with a tragic twist, his brother Stanley and his wife Teresa would also die from the same impact as Adam did. Both collapsed and died shortly afterwards, right in front of their stunned relatives. In the following days, 3 more people would fall victim to this. Mary McFarland, a 31-year-old in Elmhurst, Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant, and Mary Reiner, a 27-year-old mother from Winfield who had just given birth. All had unknowingly ingested these Tylenol capsules contained with cyanide. Now the question is how is this cyanide poisoning getting into these Tylenol boxes? Investigators found out that somebody was taking apart these pills and actually putting cyanide in them, and then returning them to pharmaceutical markets around the Chicago area. Each of these bottles had at least 65 milligrams of cyanide in each of these pills. So Johnson & Johnson, which is Tylenol's parent company, actually urged consumers to not ingest any Tylenol in their homes. So by October 5th of 1982, 31 million Tylenol bottles were taken off the shelf and examined. The recalls in the investigation allowed Tylenol to drop their sales from about 35% to 8%. In response, Johnson & Johnson introduced the tampered evident packaging in these Tylenol bottles and other pharmaceutical companies, setting a new industry standard for safety. Now, while this is going on, investigators are really trying to understand who did this, but they could never figure out who it was. Now, there was a suspect by the name of James William Lewis who wrote a letter to the Johnson & Johnson company demanding $1 million to stop, but they could never link him to the Tylenol murders. However, they did charge him for extortion. Now, what did we all learn from this story? Well, it definitely provided an introduction of tampered-proof packages, and of course the legislative changes that were behind it. It also allowed individuals to be very wary of medicines and anything that could be tampered with. It also questioned how vulnerable people can be by ingesting a product that could be tampered with. And this was one of the largest investigations in the US, but nobody could figure out who did it. So this case is always going to be, for the rest of its life, the case of who had done it, just like the Lizzie Borden murder. I just can't get over it, man. Tylenol bottles not having sealant protection on it.
That's right. Now, nobody thought about doing something like that.
I wish it was still like that. I guess everybody before 1982 trusted each other. Alright, everybody, let me close this off.
Can I say the outro this time?
Sure, Larry, go right ahead.
Please like and subscribe to my channel. Hope y'all like today's episode.
Larry, come on, stop.
And I'm going to get some likes tonight. By the way, have y'all ever tried Stud Light? I've been wearing this cap for a couple years now.
Larry, come on.
Actually, as a matter of fact, when I take the cap
Larry,
off,
come
there's
on, you're
usually a
doing way too
pimple
much
that's
now.
on top of my scalp. If y'all want to see it, I got a great collection of all my critters and toenails that's in my case in my closet. As a matter of fact, have y'all...
Larry, that's enough now. Larry, stop. Larry, stop. Larry?
You can find in the desert. How about the flamingo?
Larry, that's enough now. Come on, Larry, stop. Larry,
What y'all like to watch? I'll show you my
Don't
collection
stop, Larry.
of DVDs that I got. You know, I love to listen to Jimmy Buffett and everything and all that.
Everybody, have a
Now,
great
what
day.
type of-
Larry, stop.
You know, this beard took me years to grow. When I was a kid, I had a mohawk when I was back in the 70s.